In this video, I'll share the journey of transforming an abandoned aquarium into the paludarium I've always imagined. It begins by restoring the aquarium, creating artificial tree roots that look remarkably real, and building a hidden water flow deep within them. All of this comes together to create an exotic, untamed rainforest ecosystem. It all began with this old aquarium, a tank I received for free from a friend. But its condition was far from ideal. Every pane of glass was covered in a thick layer of scale. Deep scratches could be seen across almost every side of the tank. And in several places, the silicone had clearly begun to age. To bring this aquarium back to life, I decided to restore it. The first step was carefully removing every pane of glass using an old measuring tape. This process had to be done with great care, so not a single pane of glass would crack. One by one, each pane was carefully removed. Once all the glass was removed, I began cleaning away the silicone with a utility knife. First, I peeled away the thick outer layer. Then, I removed the next layer. Finally, I scraped away every remaining trace of silicone until the glass was completely clean. I repeated this process across every pane of the aquarium. Once everything was done, I cleared away the silicone waste before moving on to the next stage. Next, I removed the mineral deposits from the glass using a hydrochloric acid-based solution. I brushed the solution across the entire surface, focusing especially on areas where the deposits had built up the thickest. The glass had to be wiped immediately after the solution was applied, preventing the dissolved residue from drying and settling back onto the surface. I repeated this process carefully across every pane of glass. Now, all the mineral deposits were gone, yet the glass still looked dull and cloudy, just like this. So, I decided to polish it using a polishing machine and a cerium oxide compound. Hopefully, once this process was complete, the glass would become clear again. And finally, the glass was clear once again, almost as good as new. Now it was time to carefully reassemble each pane, bringing the aquarium back together and ready for use. At last, the restoration was complete. However, I intentionally left the front pane off, giving me more freedom to design the hardscape later on. Three days have passed. Today, I'm continuing with the hardscape. The concept has already been designed like this. But there was one problem. I didn't have tree roots that matched the design. So, I decided to create the roots myself, using cement. For the framework, I'm using this EVA foam. Hopefully, I can bring the roots to life exactly as I envisioned them. Before building the hardscape, I first covered the aquarium glass with plastic wrap, protecting it from any spilled cement. Now, it was time to begin. First, I cut the EVA foam into smaller pieces, making it easier to shape later. Once all the foam had been cut, I added the main foundation. Then, I began arranging and bonding the pieces of EVA foam, gradually forming a structure that resembled tree roots growing through the wild. Here, I also hid several tubes inside each tree root. After that, I filled the gaps in the framework with small pieces of foam, reducing the amount of cement I would need later. After hours of work, the tree root framework was finally complete, and I was quite happy with how it turned out. But the next stage would be the one that truly determined its final appearance, covering and shaping the entire framework with cement. I continued with the process. Here, I had already mixed the cement to the right consistency, making it easier to shape. Hopefully, I could mold the cement into something that looked like real tree roots. Here, I also added some wire to serve as temporary support. I coated them with cement pigment. The pigment was mixed into the cement and applied while it was still wet. This allowed the color to blend naturally into the cement. As a final touch, I added real roots in several places and secured them with cement. After a full day of work, the artificial tree roots were finally complete. But before moving on to the next stage, I would leave them for a full week, allowing the roots to dry and cure completely. After waiting for a full week, the artificial tree roots had finally dried and cured completely. After such a long process, the cement had finally transformed into something that resembled exotic, untamed tree roots. Their textures and crevices looked remarkably similar to the roots of a dead tree found in the wild. The small gaps scattered across the surface not only added an ancient, weathered character, but were also intentionally created as spaces for plants to grow later. Here, I also removed the protective plastic and installed the front glass panel. Seeing it all come together, I was genuinely pleased with the result. However, before this hardscape could be used, I would first soak it in several bottles of vinegar solution for a few weeks. The purpose was to help reduce the alkalinity of the cement, making it safer for the fish and plants later on. Here, I only filled the aquarium halfway, as I would be running the pump to rinse the upper tree roots, while also testing the water flow through the tubes I had previously hidden inside them. And as it turned out, the water flow worked exactly as I had hoped. Water emerged from hidden openings, flowing across and soaking the entire surface of the roots. Later, this hidden water flow would also become part of the Paludarium's ecosystem circulation system. And as for how this water flow will work within the ecosystem, I'll explain it in more detail once everything is complete. After 2 weeks of soaking, I moved on to the next stage, planting and bringing the Paludarium ecosystem to life. Before adding the plants, I first prepared a growing medium for each one, using pieces of fern root secured with fishing line. Once every plant had its growing medium in place, I began the planting process. Here, I used several types of epiphytes, climbing plants, ferns, and aroids. For some of the plants, I secured them with fishing line so they could attach firmly to the tree roots. I also added moss in several places to strengthen the rainforest atmosphere. Once the planting was complete, I added fine sand as the Paludarium substrate. After smoothing out the sand, it was finally time to fill the aquarium with water. Once the water was filled, it was time to turn on the filter pump. And finally, the water began to flow for the first time, bringing the ecosystem inside this paludarium to life. Water from the lower area was pumped upward, where it slowly flowed and dripped back down into the aquatic area. This cycle would continue to repeat. Before returning completely to the water, the flow would soak every part of the plant roots along its path. The constant movement of the dripping water also exposed it to the air, allowing more oxygen to dissolve into the water over time. And with that, the journey of this paludarium ecosystem officially began. To help establish a healthy colony of beneficial bacteria that would support the ecosystem, I added a bacterial starter. Though invisible to the naked eye, the bacteria that had previously remained dormant would gradually become active again, multiply, and begin working within this aquatic ecosystem. These bacteria play a crucial role in the nitrogen cycle. Organic waste that produces ammonia is gradually broken down into nitrite, which is then converted into nitrate. This process helps maintain water stability and supports life within the ecosystem. Alongside the bacterial starter, I also added decomposing dry leaves, allowing them to break down naturally within the water. As these leaves slowly decompose, they will form a layer of organic biofilm across the roots and other surfaces beneath the water. This will not only create a more natural appearance, but also become part of the microscopic life developing within the aquatic ecosystem. The organic remains of the decomposing leaves will also provide a food source for various microorganisms. Over time, this microscopic life will continue to develop, becoming part of the food web within this paludarium ecosystem. And from here, all I could do was wait patiently for the ecosystem to fully stabilize. Only then would it be ready to welcome its main inhabitants. A week has passed. Now, it's time to see how the ecosystem inside this paludarium has begun to take shape. Before introducing the fish as part of this ecosystem, we first need to make sure that the environment we've created is stable enough to support life within it. From a distance, the changes may seem subtle. Clearer water and plants beginning to grow fresher and healthier. But over the past week, it wasn't only the ecosystem that continued to develop. I also added a few new touches along the way. Here, I added a background designed to blend seamlessly with the hardscape in the foreground. The goal was to create an illusion of depth, making the forest behind it appear to continue far beyond the paludarium. as though this were a riverbank stretching through a tropical rainforest. The background was also designed with a soft, misty atmosphere, matching the thin layer of mist produced by a mist maker hidden behind the hardscape. When the mist maker is turned on, the real mist blends with the scenery in the background, creating the impression of a more vivid and natural forest. Beyond strengthening the humid atmosphere of a tropical rainforest, the mist also helps maintain humidity across the land area. Creating more favorable conditions for the plants to grow. In the aquatic area, I also added a hidden LED strip light. This makes it easier to observe what's happening beneath the water, especially when the fish eventually seek shelter behind the roots. When the main lights are turned off, the glow from beneath the water creates an entirely different atmosphere within the Paludarium. But the changes taking place here are far more complex than what meets the eye. Look a little closer, and we begin to discover that countless natural processes are quietly unfolding within it. One of the most noticeable changes can be seen in the water itself. The leaves that were added earlier have continued to decompose. As time passes, almost the entire bottom has become covered by a thin, brownish layer. It coats the sand, clings to the roots, and settles across the surface of the leaves. At first glance, this layer may simply look like dirt. But in reality, it is a sign that microscopic life within the ecosystem has begun to develop. This layer is known as organic biofilm, a complex community of bacteria, aquatic fungi, microorganisms, and fine particles released as the leaves break down. In nature, biofilm plays an important role in decomposing organic waste, helping maintain water quality, while also serving as a natural food source for various aquatic inhabitants. And, as decomposition continues, the decaying leaves gradually release organic carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and other nutrients into the water, enriching it over time. But these nutrients don't simply remain at the bottom. They are carried upward by the pump, reaching the land above. Each drop of water carries nutrients from the aquatic ecosystem onto the land, slowly flowing through the entire network of plant roots. This is where the plants begin to play their vital role. Their roots absorb nitrates, phosphates, potassium, and other minerals released through decomposition and carried by the flowing water. Nutrients that once came from decaying leaves are eventually transformed into new leaves. In other words, what was once dead becomes new life, a natural cycle of recycling that continues without end. This process connects the aquatic and terrestrial environments into a single living system, known as a paludarium. The water carries the nutrients plants need to keep growing. In return, the plants absorb excess nutrients from the water, helping the water that returns to the aquatic area become cleaner and more stable. Now, every part of the ecosystem is working as it should, and that means this paludarium is finally ready to welcome its main inhabitants. The moment I had been waiting for had finally arrived. The introduction of the inhabitants that would complete the ecosystem inside this paludarium. Before releasing them, I first acclimatized them to their new environment. For this habitat, I chose a small school of neon tetras and several discus. I could hardly wait to finally introduce them to their new home. After allowing them some time to acclimatize, it was finally time to release them. With both groups of fish now inside, the ecosystem suddenly felt much more complete. Both discus and neon tetras are native to rivers connected to the Amazon basin and tributaries across South America. The waters they inhabit are generally calm, with dark water, submerged tree roots, and fallen leaves scattered across the riverbed. Here, I tried to recreate that atmosphere inside this paludarium. With gentle water movement, tree roots, organic material, shadows, and small spaces that resemble their natural habitat. In the wild, neon tetras are small, schooling fish. Their lively, coordinated movements keep them weaving through the narrow spaces of their habitat. At times, they move together as one, then scatter before gathering once again. The discus, meanwhile, have a very different character. Their movements are far more calm and deliberate. With their broad bodies and graceful motion, they slowly glide through the water, moving between the roots and shadows within the paludarium. Every now and then, the neon tetras can be seen searching for food. They scatter among the roots, picking at tiny organisms carried by the current or hidden among the organic material. Perhaps they are finding small crustaceans or zooplankton. This simple behavior makes them appear so active, as though they were living out their natural lives within this habitat. The discus behave much the same way. From time to time, they can be seen picking at the substrate, as if searching for something hidden beneath the surface. And when the main lights are turned off, the atmosphere within the habitat changes instantly. The remaining light creates a much darker and wilder scene. The silhouettes of the discus gliding between the roots create a truly beautiful sight, as if drawing us deep into the atmosphere of the wild itself. Looking at all of this, after such a long journey, it finally feels like all the hard work has paid off. But this Paludarium's journey has only just begun. If you'd like to continue following along, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Thank you for watching all the way to the end, and I'll see you in the next video.